person's argument is that there's two types of things. There's things that can be corrupted, and there's things that can't be corrupted. If it can't be corrupted, then it's a supreme good, because, that's just how it is.
What would Augustine say is the supreme good? God, okay. God is the supreme good. He's incorruptible. He's also what?
Being.
Yeah, being, the essence or nature of existence itself. And then everything that exists is contingent or dependent upon that which exists absolutely. How do those corruptible things become corrupted? What have we said thus far?
We said that nothing can be independent from God because everything that exists depends on Him. So we can't truly be independent from Him.
He is absolute existence. Excellent, thank you.
All of the things that God creates, which is everything is good because God created it. And so there is no evil. Evil doesn't exist. Because in order for something to be corrupted, it has to start off as a good.
And now that we are continuing on, we have that final question on how do things become corrupt? We talked about there's two ways to sin. There's the disordering of good, and there's also you sin to get that good. And I think Adam and Eve did both of those things, because obedience to God is the higher good, and eating the apple is a lesser good. Disobeying God's order is the sin that they did to achieve that good.
So how can knowledge of good and evil be a bad thing in and of itself? Rather, it seems that the means by which it was attained corrupted them. They placed themselves before God.
So then here he clearly states that evil does not exist at all. And then that the reason for that is because there's nothing outside it which could break in and destroy the order which you have imposed on it.
A scorpion taken by itself isn't bad, and I'm sure it has some sort of job to do in the ecosystem. Just a scorpion all by itself is good, and then in respect to the ecosystem, it is good. So with respect to some elements, it's good, but we have a conflict of interest because we're less interested in whatever role it plays in the ecosystem and more interested in the fact that it hurts. So we could think it's evil. I mean, that's a bit far, but we could think of it as bad, but in reality it's good. And we're just not considering everything as a whole.
I think Augustine's life and experience is full of examples of this misperception, I guess, of seeing something, not seeing the whole of it as and good in itself. With his first experience with the Old Testament, it's good in itself and there's a lot to it, but he didn't see all of it that was hidden beneath it.
It says on the bottom of 125, I no longer wish individual things to be better because I consider the totality. Superior things are self-evidently better than inferior. Yet with sounder judgment, I held that all things taken together are better than the superior things by themselves. So looking at things as a whole clarifies why evil doesn't exist. Looking at all the good things together rather than specifically looking at a few will give you a better idea of those things compared to God or the supreme good.
Do we sin when we think of evil? Because would it be disordering the goods?
Augustine still thinks there are bad things. Evil doesn't exist, but things can still be bad for you. Bad still happens, but it's more that it's a disordering of goods or a deprivation of good.
I feel it's hard to discuss his point when I don't agree that evil does not exist at all. He's not very clear about how he's proving that.
I think I understand your point, because he says evil is the privation of good, but what is the mechanism? He doesn't really refer to a specific mechanism by which that happens. And I guess if he said, it takes a human to disorder the goods, does evil not exist without people?
I think I would agree with him in saying that evil doesn't exist as a thing, because like he says, you know, if God is good and God made everything, then everything that exists has to be good. But I think it's important to think about the ways he said, like, you can still do evil almost, where like you can still act evilly, even if evil isn't a thing. Every existence is good, but there's still like bad in the world. It's just not a substance.
I think that's an important distinction. He's still going to consent that there are bad things, right? People do wicked things. There are actions that are morally reprehensible, right? But evil in and of itself doesn't exist.
Like, I understand, like, Satan is a really bad person, but I can still see that his existence would be good because God made his existence.
Is Satan good insofar that he participates in the existence of God?
Yes.
Augustine would say yes.
Yeah.
So I think that's evil, because it's the conscious decision to drag people away from the supreme good.
Right, so he does evil, but because he was originally an angel, according to the Bible, right? And so I don't remember exactly why it says that he fell.
Because he wanted to be God. Again, the same extent as power as God.
Trying to be as good as God is not necessarily bad, right? Like, trying to be a perfect person isn't bad. It was because he ordered that above, like, God himself. So it was just, again, like what Augustine says, I think it was a misordering of goods. And so, like, yes, he does a lot of evil, and that's why Augustine isn't saying that you can't act evilly, but he was made good because he was made an angel. And so his existence is still good, even if the purpose for his existence now is to do evil.
My problem where I'm getting still confused is on how evil is being used and defined. I guess I agree with Augustine with respect to his description on if things exist, then they're good because God created them. And yes, I agree with that. But I think that especially with Satan, if Satan is, like Andrew was saying, this entity that is wholly evil, then it's based.
Doesn't exist.
Yeah, then he wouldn't exist if you're using Augustine's logic, because he says that things that are wholly corrupted cease to be.
If you consider Satan's existence as a whole, and because we are agreeing that he was made by God and therefore had some good, and was therefore corruptible, he was corruptible because he was corrupted. And even if he can't be corrupted further, he is still corruptible. Like, he was never incorruptible, because in order for him to get to his current state, he was corrupted. And therefore, like, by nature, he was corruptible.
Can Satan exist apart from God? Based on Augustine, can he?
No.
And he who wanted to usurp God is enslaved to God by his existence. And doesn't that make Satan hate God all the more? That he wanted to be better than him, and yet, even in his state, he is still dependent on him. I think if Satan could, he would destroy himself to despite God. To say, my existence is not within your power. And the fact that God sustains Satan in his existence is God exercising power over Satan, saying, you cannot exist apart from me. And that makes God all the more hateful to Satan. I think that's interesting, right? It's an interesting drama to consider. Answering the question of evil. What a day.